Look at that. Our mysterious survivor has awoken.
Where am I? Who are you?
Jespar Matumiel Delveric. Jespar for short. And you, my friend, are at my very own campsite. Before you ask, yes, the bandits killed both of the apothecary. The only reason you're still alive is that the impact of the explosion threw you right into the thicket. Most of your injuries are only superficial, but your fever, well, that's a different story.
What about the apothecary?
I was on the perimeter, and no, I didn't help for two reasons. One, I was outnumbered. Two, I'm quite fond of my entrails. I wish I had a more heroic answer, but I don't. Sorry.
How do you know about my fever?
Quite a lot, actually. You're suffering from Arcanist's fever. Honestly, I'm surprised the old apothecarius didn't see that. Let me guess, you're suddenly capable of doing things you previously knew only from the bard songs, right? You're unusually strong, you have reflexes like a cat, and drinking potions or any kind of magically infused substance leaves a bitter afterglow in your head.
Yes, she should be dead, yet.
Well then, congratulations. Your magical talent just blossomed. A bit late, given your age, but it happens. Put simply, the fever is a result of your body not being able to cope with it. It's not much of a problem for now, but if you don't let an Arcanist treat you sometime soon, things are going to get grim.
So it can be cured?
Contain it, not cure it. From here on out, you're always going to be a little more sensitive than someone without magical gifts. But that's tolerable compared to what your magic will allow you to do.
A little sensitive?
Prone to certain conditions. As I said, your fever will get worse if you drink healing potions. But you'll also be a lot more susceptible to nightmares and those kinds of things. Also, you should be very cautious of areas with magical contamination, such as Thalgard in the east.
What if it gets worse?
At first, diffuse headaches, general unease. Later on, your eyesight will blur, your limbs will grow weak, and you'll get a maddening itch all over your body. If you leave it untreated for too long, you'll either die or turn into an Orbaya.
Dead? Orbaya?
Yes, it can kill you. Everything has its price, as the wise hermit likes to say. And an Orbaya is basically a giant undead version of yourself with tumors and pus all over your body. Just never let the fever get too bad.
Any remedies?
Well, there's ambrosia, but for an uncontained fever, it'll only postpone the symptoms. Later, you can drink it whenever the fever gets worse. The stuff looks and tastes like undead sweat, and is bloody expensive, but it's the only thing that really helps.
But what about the visions?
You have visions?
He seemed to know something about this fever. She'd have to gamble and trust him if she wanted some information.
Not that I know of. The only visions I've ever had are those that come along with a good pipe of peaceweed. You know what? As I said, someone needs to contain your fever as soon as possible. And as it happens, I know people. But in return, I want you to tell me everything. What did you do in that temple? And what's the story with those visions? I can't put my finger on it, but there's something strange about you, and that intrigues me. What do you say?
Treat me for information.
Well then, the stage is yours. I see. My condolences for your loss. So, let me summarize. You somehow survived getting thrown into the open sea, and while you were half dead, had this dream in which you saw burnt bodies and a blinding light?
It wasn't much, but she was clutching at straws already. It's not like she had a choice. Yes, but the temple is real.
Huh. And you also said that your magic didn't develop gradually, as it usually does, but all at once, right?
Together with those visions.
Well, that's quite the story. I guess you know how absurd it sounds, but for some reason, I believe you. I've met a lot of liars in my life, and you aren't one of them. All right, it's settled then. I'll introduce you to my employer and ask him to treat you. Before we leave, however, there's something else I need to take care of, and I could use a hand. The sooner we get that done, the sooner we can make for Ark.
Ark?
Ark? The capital of this country? Walls high as towers of iron-hard stone rest alone in the mountains in granite enthroned. Never decaying, the ages surveying, guarded by Malthus, and blah, 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 and so on and so forth. You're going to see it soon.
Who's this employer?
Well, aren't you curious? I work for the Holy Order.
You mean the guys who work for the gods?
Yeah, but they're more than just a military unit here. Enderal belongs to Malthus, the guardian god, and the Order answers directly to him. In other words, they're calling the shots here. No king, no queen, no council, just an order of noble warriors always looking so stern and joyless that you might think they're struggling with constipation.
Heh, this Jespar had a sense of humor. They'd get along just fine. But what if I want to do this solo?
Up to you. But without me accompanying you, the guards won't let you into the Sun Temple in Ark. And that's the only place you can get your fever treated.
So no temple, no cure. Not like she had a choice then.
Splendid. You'll need some information before you can help me, though. I take it the fact that Vin has seen better times hasn't eluded your attention, has it? For the last 2 years, there have been wars and unrest everywhere. And even though in Enderal there's officially peace, there are peculiar things happening here, too. Normally docile animals and vatirs attacking wanderers in the open. The dead awakening in hordes. It's unsettling, to say the least. The strangest thing, however, is the Red Madness.
Is that related to the rumor of the god's death? Nerim's all abuzz with that talk.
Yeah, the rumors. I've heard them too. And I could indeed imagine that they're true, and that there's a connection, yes.
He seemed wary. Do you believe the dead?
As I said, maybe. If you ask me, the Lightborn were never more than imposters anyway. False gods.
Is that a common belief in Enderal?
Well, they usually leave the thinking to their holy order. And they, of course, deny everything. But as much as I hate to say it, maybe it's better this way, at least for now. A spiritual crisis is the last thing this country needs at the moment.
And I thought Enderals were so pious.
Oh, I'm hardly representative. I've seen that a long life is only one of the things powerful magic can achieve. And the false deity theory isn't that new, after all, is it? Seriously, say the Lightborn really are as mighty as the revelations say they are. Wouldn't they have the power to call down lightning on me right here and right now, to punish me for my insolence? No. The Lightborn were immortal kings, and that's all. At least, that's how I see it. I hope I didn't hurt your feelings.
Still waiting for that lightning?
We're going to get along just fine. But we digress.
Yes, the Red Madness?
Yeah. It's some kind of mental illness that makes people lose their mind. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a smith in Ark who butchered his entire family. He was drunk, but that doesn't explain why he screamed things like "Fear the light" while he was doing it. Or a young woman of noble path who set her own house on fire while her family was asleep. Now, you might say that these kinds of things happen, but by now there have been more than a dozen incidents in a very short period of time. The fact that the afflicted's eyes glow red while they go rampant has made people call the disease the Red Madness. Thing is, some weeks ago it happened again, only this time it was a magister from the Holy Order itself.
A magister?
A teacher who instructs the novices aspiring to become keepers. His name was Yarrow, a man with more than 60 winters on his back.
What did he do?
Well, according to the sole survivor, he entered the teaching room that day as usual, but instead of giving his lecture on alchemy, he gave a strange kind of speech where he kept going on about how mankind is corrupted and that it has succumbed to the void. Then his eyes started glowing, he locked the door, and blew himself up in a magical explosion.
That's horrible.
Yes, it is.
But what's that got to do with you? You know, monk?
I'm not one for vows and austerity, so no, I'm no keeper. My specialty is recovering lost things. Treasures, tomes, memories, and the like. And the Order hired me to do just that. They want to know how a man like Yarrow could fall victim to the Red Madness. and thus if there's something like a pattern to this malady.
Motives, right? But I don't know this Magister.
Doesn't matter. Yarrow grew up in a small village not far from here, and according to the Order, he visited it quite often after his partner died. What I want your help with is finding clues as to why he did what he did. What do you think?
Sounds like a plan then.
Great! First of all, I want you to travel to Riverville and talk to an old man named Alfred, a childhood friend of Yarrow's. Ask him what he makes of the incident, and whether he has any explanation for it. Secondly, a farm boy told me that he saw Yarrow throw something into the sea during his last visit there. The winds have been blowing inland the last couple of days, so go search the shoreline and see if it washed up. I myself will take a look at the house Yarrow grew up in. Ah, and here. This is a map of the region. Yarrow's house is at the blue dot. So, unless there's anything else, I'd say let's step to it. Just meet me at the farm when you're done.
Kilenna wasn't sure of this Jespar. He told a good yarn, but who's to know how true it is? It could be a nice pile of stinking cow manure. Better dig deeper.
Huh?
Dalvarik, you say? A noble family?
Huh. Well observed. Yes, I am indeed sublime by my path, but please, just ignore that, will you? I'm not a big fan of titles. Most of the time, they're just a means for boring people to feel superior towards others.
But you say you're a treasure hunter.
Treasure hunter? That has a nice ring to it. But let's just say I help people to fulfill certain materialistic desires of theirs. Just like the Holy Warden who brings back the lost shoe to the maiden. Only the maiden pays me to do it. And I have a more flexible conscience, so to speak.
Let's butter him up a bit. A mysterious sellsword, you say?
You do? That's good. But let's save the socializing for later, okay? Usually I am always in for a good talk, but for now let's focus on the mission.
Right, so he's a rebellious noble.
Keep your chin up.
Maybe even an outcast from his family. But he didn't have the usual arrogance of nobles, so that at least spoke to the sincerity of his words. Maybe he was a serial killer.
Now a good pipe.
Serial killers weren't cool enough to smoke pipes. Maybe this guy was okay after all. They call me the Butcher. Looks like the autobiography of a mass murderer, of unknown origins, adopted by a Dao Tana. Lucky enough to catch the eye of the Order and receive a higher education. But he meets a mysterious woman in a vision. She commanded him to follow his true self. That last part gave Kilenna goosebumps. The mysterious robed woman. Just like that scene on the ship's hold. She had mentioned probabilities, and Kilenna had been changed by that encounter. Was she too supposed to find her true self? Nah, she dismissed the thought. She wasn't going to become like that. She wouldn't fulfill her dead father's accusations. She was not a murderer. It looked like she had to get to this village. If the priest knew anything about this arcane fever Jespar had mentioned, then she'd need his help. But first, she had something to take care of. Finn and Carbos were dead, killed by brigands. She owed them her life, it seems, and the least she could do was give them a proper sending off into the afterlife. The dam was more imposing in the light of day. The waterworks were quite sophisticated and drove a number of water wheels like the ones you'd seen in the ruins. There's the camp. The smoke still wafted from the camp, some from the fire pit, and some from the bomb's explosion. A lone figure crouched over the herb crate Finn had used to cure her. From what Jespar had said, the two apothecarius had died in the attack, so it was probably a brigand. But better approach carefully. She was clumsy enough to wake a drunken sailor, but the brigand was too busy looting to notice. There's Finn. She carefully retrieved the badge from his neck. Likewise with Carbos. Sure, he'd been gruff and unwelcoming, but he'd been proven right in his caution. She had a chance to get the drop on this bandit. She get revenge for Finn and Carbos. That barely scratched the bastard. This wasn't going to go well, was it? She desperately swung as she tried to keep the chair between her and the bandit. Forget the sword. Battering him with the shield turned out to be more effective. Yes, that's how bad her swordsmanship was. The bandits hadn't had a chance to loot the encampment, so she made sure to leave nothing to the others should they come by this way. And she carefully shifted Finn and Carbos' bodies into a more secluded corner. She couldn't give them a proper Nehrim burial, but she'd heard that Enderals preferred to have their bodies offered to the flame. It wasn't much, and it certainly wasn't a proper ceremony, but she made sure that the scavengers wouldn't devour the remains. After tapping her sword to her chest in the fashion of Nehrim, she set on her path. She carefully wrapped the two amulets. The least she could do was return them to the guild of the apothecary to let them know of the fate of the pair. She consumed some bread to restore her condition, and looked around the dam. There were scattered gems, not of great worth, but it seems that the river dragged in some useful minerals from the mountains. But the bandit wasn't the only danger around. Arrows whistled around her head as she sought cover behind a tree. There was only one way to deal with archers: charge and close the distance. The blade wasn't much good against bones, but she kept the thing off balance by bashing it with a shield. Maybe she should just use two shields instead, because they were proving far more effective than the sword. Well, at least Jespar hadn't been lying about the dead rising. These red menace seemed to be real. She recalled that Carbos had talked about locking up. Maybe there was something she could use inside the damn lookout. The chittering sound coming from upstairs put her on alert. Spiders? Too many legs to be a person. Yes, the apothecary had been using this tower for storage. But why hadn't they taken care of the spiders? Maybe they just left each other alone. She carefully edged up the stairs. There were barrels of oil stored up in the attic that had leaked all over the floor. One hit from this ballista would bring them crashing down on the spiders. And to finish off the spider before it became aware of her. Ambrosia. Jespar had mentioned it as a way to keep the arcane fever down. She'd need to keep a lookout for these ingredients. The thickness of the webs spoke to this place being abandoned for a long time, or at least nobody had been brave enough to clear the upper floor. She found some heavy boots and a heavy shield to match the rest of her armor. The chain did something, and there was a rumbling sound, but the webs were too thick to see beyond them. Nothing that a bit of fire wouldn't fix. Another magical symbol.
Oh, blazes. Sorry. I know. I can't sing.
Well, Jespar, you sing better than those spiders. Together they made short work of the wolf.
Huh? Keep your chin up.
Looks like Jespar was capable at least. She wasn't dealing with an incompetent. even if she still didn't know what his true motivations were. The beast was quite majestic, despite the danger involved. And danger there was. Boulders rained down the path. Travelers, beware of rockfall and assault. So that's where the boulders had come from. Better keep an eye out. Someone had stashed something near the waterfall below the dam. Oh, there's the owner of the stash. She exchanged a few shots, but she wasn't winning this. Time to flee! More ruins and more spiders. And yet more ruins. This Sun Coast must have been a busy place at one point. But who's this?
No, no, you will not take her! Away with you!
Sorry?
You will not have her! Elfried stays with me! And drop the disguise already. I know a god of death when I see one.
The god of death?
What? Oh, I'm sorry. I had a nightmare. Anyway, who are you? I wasn't expecting to meet anyone else out here. Save for the bandits, that is.
A long story. But what about you?
No, I'm not. This ruin over there. You know, I'm a merchant, and my specialties are all kinds of things with historical background. The things you usually find in ruins. Of course, I'm usually not stupid enough to go looking for them myself, but there was this traveler from Ark who told me about this place, the Three River Watch, and he said that it's hardly guarded. Well, since I was in the area anyway, I thought it wouldn't hurt to take a look. Great idea, really. Look, I know we just met, but truth be told, I really got myself into some trouble here, and you look as if you know how to defend yourself. Something terrible happened, and I simply don't know what to do anymore.
Elfriede, right?
Yes, my Elfried. She was kidnapped. By the stars, I was so stupid. We were just about to make camp for the night, and I went to search for some firewood. And then, just like that, she's gone.
Bandits?
No, a Vatir. I heard him grunting, you know. He lives in that damned ruin. I tried to sneak in, but it's impossible. And I can't go back to Riverville for help either. That would take way too long. Please, you have to help me. If anything happens to Elfried, I would never forgive myself.
Alright.
Oh, by the ancient fathers, thank you, and hurry. Walk blessed and stay safe.
Kilenna was not in a position to rescue anyone. She might have scavenged a bit of armor, but all she did was clank around like a puppet with its strings cut. Her axe was more of a club than a cutting instrument. But she couldn't leave innocents to die. Cursing her curiosity, she set off for the watch. It was in poor condition, but that was just a crumbling over time. No battle had taken place here, and no invaders had taken the place. Just the inexorable passage of time. The top of the high tower had been used to watch passing ships. From the looks of it, one had fallen afoul of the sea and beached itself. Hopefully nobody had been kidnapped to the wreck. Kilenna wasn't in the mood to do our second rescue. The watch was quite peaceful. Where were the kidnappers? Aside from butterflies fluttering about and the crackling of the magical fire, there was no signs that this place was anything but abandoned. No noise inside the building either, but Kilenna didn't assume anything. The Vatir must be here, even though she didn't know what they looked like. A horn-shaped charged at her. She loosed an arrow and desperately jumped into a cubbyhole. She had the advantage of reach, and the thing's claws scraped against the stonework, but she remained untouched. Getting within arm's length of that thing was sure to end poorly. Some cleansing flame was what she needed. She let her fear and anger loose on that thing. It was terrifying to look at even in death.
Oh, by the gods! Over here, precious! Over here! It's alright now. Mommy is back. Yes, it's alright. I don't even know how to thank you. 1 second later in that thing. I don't even want to think about it. Here, take this. It's a rare herb, and I hope it's compensation enough for your efforts. At least partially. If you need anything else, just come talk to me. Now that that beast is gone, I might as well take a look at the area. Walk blessed and stay safe.
She'd risked her life for that? It looked like a goatling. Guess the Batir felt some maternal instincts towards the little horn thing. Guess that all's well that ends well. The watch had been her backwater for some time now, it seems. Maybe the mine that spoke of had run dry of gems. Or maybe the rise of banditry had led to trade drying up. Only a small spider, luckily. Recently hatched, it seems. More of those crystals. She'd learned a lesson. Better keep a distance. She crept up to get the staff and the books. But she sure wasn't going to sleep in that bed. Were spiders attracted to the crystals? She'd noted that there seemed to be spiders wherever the crystals were found. And the webs here were particularly concentrated around the crystals. She had no way to know, but that was something to look into. No more talking to strangers. She didn't fancy risking her life to rescue goatlings, regardless how cute they might be. Merchants? Hail, good fellows. Can you share some news of the road ahead?
Now look at that. A lonesome traveler. Some folks just never learn.
Alright, I've learned. Leave me alone. She gave it a proper legging, then ran into wolves. Things weren't going well, were they? Bandits! Wolves! Like the ancients said, it's not stupid if it works. No talking to strangers. Period.
Want and plenty of it.
Riverville. Bloody hell. This was a trip and a half. Of course, more wolves. No way to outrun them. But she could climb, they couldn't. Oh my, houses. That must be Riverville. It was still too far to be heard even by shouting. But a farmhand heard the wolves and started battling them. Yes, even a bloody farmhand was better at battle than she was.
Foreigner, huh? What a surprise.
The disdain was dripping from his voice. But who cares? The wolves are gone, and she was hopefully safe in Riverville.
Hey, you there! Yes, you! Do you want to know a secret?
What do you mean?
Well, I found something. Something really, real. How about it? I show you what I mean, and you promise to help me in return. What do you say? Dangerous? I don't know. You wouldn't be as close to the village and to the guards then, would you? And I don't want Daddy and the others to find out about this. That would spoil the surprise.
Tell me more.
I'll show you in a moment, but first, you have to promise to help me. Come on, don't be a chicken.
Alright.
Awesome! I knew you'd say yes. Come, follow me.
Maybe the kid was lying. But what did she have to lose?
Look, I found this yesterday when I was searching for shells. Awesome, isn't it?
A casket.
Yes, and you know what? If you shake it, you can hear a rattling, as if there are coins in it. All we need to do is break it open, then we can split the loot. And I could give Daddy the money for the pointy beard man. So what do you think? I've already tried to open it, but it just won't budge.
Pointed bearded man.
Yeah, that man from the big city, who always comes after a moon turn. He wants money from the farmers. Daddy says he works for this Janker board or something like that.
You mean landlord? Rent, right?
Yeah, I think so. He always tries to make us think everything is okay, but I'm not stupid. And maybe there are enough pennies in this box for Daddy to pay the pointy beard man. Who knows?
Its rust is shut.
Yes! Awesome! Let's see what's in there. There are... Oh, come on. What is that?
What is it?
There aren't any pennies. Only these weird nails and a piece of paper. Here, take a look for yourself.
Day and night it stands there sublime, proud, full of power, giving blessing in times of need, on our path until we die. Looks like a poem?
A poem? What if it's a riddle? That's what you grown-ups call it, don't you? What does it say exactly? A blessing in distress? That... Oh, sugar. Why do you grown-ups always have to talk so complicated? That is... Wait. Father Vildus, the priest, he always talks about blessings at the sermons. Maybe the writer is talking about the shrine. The one behind our house. Quickly, you should go take a look over there. I have to go back to the farm to feed the Leors, but tell me at once if you find anything. Did you look at the shrine yet?
Right, the altar. On the back side there was something carved. Just another poem, kid.
Oh my, this is getting really confusing. Maybe we should just take a look around. What do you think? We were right about the shrine, so maybe the next clue is also hidden somewhere near here. I will wait right here.
West was mentioned. There was an odd tree there. Beyond the tree she saw a set of stairs and some ruins. A tomb of some sort. A sword that looked magical in a casket. Looks like the entire thing was the work of a disappointed father. It was a tale as old as time itself, cutting the useless children from the inheritance. Meaningful. Kilenna vowed that she would spend his money meaningfully. You were right, kid. There was money there.
What? Really? That's awesome! How much was it? I get one half, you get the other.
Wolves! Save me, farmhand!
Oi! What the f are you doing? Guards!
She bravely covered the rear as he advanced towards the wolves. Watch out, lady, there's wolves about. Well, Kilenna couldn't fault the lady's bravery. Maybe too brave to take on wolves with a knife. No, they killed her! Kilenna felt responsible for this. If she hadn't pulled the wolves to Riverville, this person would still be alive. The guard had to be told about this. Madison?
Greetings! Aye, many and hardly any good ones. The streets are swarming with highwaymen and brigands these days, more than I've seen in all the years I've served now. What's happening to this world, I wonder? Seems everyone is eager to go at each other's throats. It's a shame.
She couldn't bring herself to be the bearer of bad news. His wife was dead.
Potatoes gone.
Hey!
you're an adventurer, aren't you? Have you been to... oh, how do they say it? Melee? My dad told me that's where the petrified live.
Adventurer. Yeah, sure. She had to hide behind farmhands and village women. Some adventurer. Kilenna couldn't let the village woman lie where she did. In the custom of the Enderalans, she commended her to the flame. You wouldn't make up for the guilt, but you just have to make sure the sacrifice wasn't in vain. She asked around for work. Something that someone as
Can I help
unskilled
you?
as her could do. Something simple.
Well, I know this old alchemist woman from the nobles' quarter has been getting on the guard's nerves for weeks. Something about her son, I think. You could pay her shop a visit and see what she needs. Maybe that'll stop her from bothering us.
There was nothing she could do. She couldn't fight bandits. Was there anything she could do?
Hey, wait a minute, you... Never mind.
What is it?
Oh, you're an outlander, aren't you? From Kilenna. Your skin, it looks, different. I mean no offense, really. I'm just, well, curious.
My mother, yes.
Narum, you say? Huh. But still, your mother must have told you a lot about her homeland, didn't she? Say, is it true that on Kilenna, even the door handles of the slum houses are coated with gold? I've heard the Blue Islands Coalition is so rich that they can afford to command a mercenary army large enough to fight an army of seraphs.
Don't be fooled by appearances. There's wealth and poverty in equal measure.
Huh. I see. That's too bad. You know, once this chaos in the world is over, I want to go travel myself. Who knows? Maybe a captain will hire me as a deckhand. Anyway, thanks for your time. Walk blessed.
Another Madison? The lady's son?
One day, I'm gonna be an adventurer. And I'm gonna explore the entire world.
Now she really felt guilty. The boy had clearly been scarred by the loss of his mother. He spoke of adventure, but there was equal parts revenge in that voice. A wolf hunter had been born. But she still owed the kid half the contents of the coffer.
What? Really? That's awesome! How much was it? I get one half, you get the other.
She might be hard up on money, but she wasn't going to defraud a kid. Especially when it was about keeping a roof over their family.
Oh, wow! This is so much! Man, you are awesome, do you know that? Thanks a bunch. I really hope this is enough for the pointy beard man. Come by anytime if you want to talk, okay? You're a good person, and Mommy always says there are too few.
She thought of her own family. Was there any other way it could have ended? Did her daddy still blame her for the careless words that had brought the wrath of the masked man down on them? She'd been just a child, but on that day she'd learned the danger of loose talk. She'd never forgotten that lesson. The sun was setting. She had no bed of her own, but the inn had some she could borrow. At a price, of course, but she couldn't sleep on the streets.
Evening. War on Narum. War on Kilenna. Red madness. The fuck is wrong with this world?
Please, sit down. A game. Come on, take a seat.
This wasn't the game that she knew about, but she could use a distraction.
Good luck. You'll need it.
$20 pennies. That wasn't a laughing matter.
Hello.
Maybe her luck was finally turning for the better.
blessed.
Is there a free room?
Aye, there is. It may not be the palace of the Golden Queen, but it is comfy, lice-free, and affordable. What do you say?
Sounds good.
Wonderful. I'll open up the room for you. Sleep soundly.
Huh? What do you want?
She envied people who could afford the time for a leisurely pipe.
Malfest's blessings.
That gave her an idea, but first she'd need some wood. She got a small nap and headed off to the lumberyard. It was a cool evening, not too cold, but not too warm for physical labor like chopping wood. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Feel free to leave a like, subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified when new videos come out. See you soon.